I still remember the exact moment my stomach dropped. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where work kept me glued to my desk, and my phone vibrated more with bank alerts than with messages from loved ones. I had just finished a report when I glanced down and saw a notification. $4,250 purchase confirmed. My pulse quickened. My eyes blinked rapidly, trying to process if it was some sort of error. I hadn't authorized anything, not even a small online order. But the digits glared at me, almost mocking me. It wasn't just money. It was nearly my entire savings for the month. My hands trembled as I unlocked my banking app, only to find a string of luxury bookings, airline charges, and hotel confirmations. All of it under my name, tied to my card, but none of it mine. At first, I thought I'd been hacked. That would have been the rational explanation. Random fraud, a stranger exploiting my account. But then I noticed something peculiar in the booking details. Benjamin's full name as the primary traveler, my husband. My own husband had been the one to drain my account in broad daylight. I froze, staring at the screen as if it would explain itself, as if some logical reason might appear in the fine print. A slow, bitter heat crawled up my chest, the betrayal setting in like poison. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, the most sacred thread binding us together. And he had torn it without hesitation. The worst part? Benjamin had kissed me goodbye that very morning, his smile soft and charming, telling me he loved me before I left for work. I could still hear his voice in my head, smooth and convincing, like it had been every time he wanted to pacify me when bills piled up, or when I asked why his business deals never seemed to bear fruit. He was always good at weaving words, making promises that seemed almost believable. That was Benjamin's talent. He could make a lie sound like poetry. But now, with these charges staring back at me, the illusion shattered. The words, the kisses, the glances, they were all tools in a game I hadn't realized I was playing. Memories of our early years flooded back to me in cruel flashes. The way he swept me off my feet, the way he made me feel chosen in a crowded world, the way he insisted that together, nothing could shake us. I had believed him then, with my whole heart. I defended him when Clara, my best friend, raised questions about his vagueness and his erratic jobs. I assured her, almost indignantly, that Benjamin was simply unconventional, that his dreams were bigger than most people could comprehend. Now, staring at those charges, I realized Clara had been right all along. Maybe I had been blinded by love, or maybe I had been terrified of admitting the truth, that the man I trusted with my soul was not the man I thought he was. The betrayal didn't come quietly. It came like a storm, tearing through my thoughts, rewriting every moment we'd shared. Was his affection real? Were the late nights at the office really about work? Or had he been plotting, waiting for the perfect chance to indulge himself at my expense? I wanted to scream, but the office around me was silent, filled with the soft clicking of keyboards and the buzz of the fluorescent lights. I was trapped in a nightmare, but no one could see it. No one knew that my entire life had just cracked wide open. By the time I made it home that evening, the house felt different, heavier, like it was holding secrets in its walls. I dropped my bag and walked into the living room, where Benjamin was sprawled on the couch with the television on, acting as if nothing had happened. He glanced at me, smiled faintly, and went back to his show. My heart pounded in my chest, my mouth dry, but I couldn't bring myself to confront him. Not yet. I needed answers. But more than that, I needed proof. Without it, he would twist the truth, turn the blame onto me, just as he always did when things went wrong. I sat on the edge of the bed later that night, scrolling through every detail on my phone. Flight tickets to Paris, hotel reservations in his name, spa treatments and excursions, all booked within the span of 2 days. Thousands of dollars, spent as if it meant nothing. My hands clenched the phone so tightly I thought the screen might crack under the pressure. Rage and sorrow battled inside me, each wave stronger than the last. I loved him, but I also wanted to hate him, to shake him until he admitted why he had done this. But part of me feared the answer, because what if it wasn't about money at all? What if it was something much darker? Lying awake that night, I kept replaying his face in my mind, the ease with which he had sat there, watching TV, unaware or unconcerned, that I knew everything. That calmness was almost inhuman, like he had rehearsed it. That's when I realized Benjamin wasn't panicking because he didn't have to. He thought he was untouchable. He believed his charm, his lies, his manipulations would cover him, as they always had, and maybe they would, unless I found the courage to finally act. So I made a vow in that moment, staring at the ceiling in the dark. This wouldn't end with me broken. I would not be another woman fooled into silence. I would gather every detail, every piece of evidence, and I would make him face the truth he had been hiding for so long. What I didn't know then was that my discovery about the stolen card was only the beginning, and that Benjamin's secret stretched far beyond what I could ever imagine. The next morning, I carried myself through work like a ghost, my mind barely anchored in the present. My colleagues chatted about trivial things, weekend plans, office gossip, but I couldn't hear them. The numbers from my bank app kept flashing in my head, screaming at me like neon signs. $4,750, and more. Each transaction was another dagger, each receipt another betrayal. I tried to bury my emotions under paperwork, but the anger simmered just beneath my skin. I wasn't just furious at Benjamin. I was furious at myself for trusting him so blindly, for ignoring every red flag that now seemed painfully obvious. That evening, when I stepped into our home, I studied him carefully, searching for cracks in his facade. He greeted me casually, like nothing had shifted, like the air between us wasn't electric with unspoken tension. His ease unsettled me. It wasn't just arrogance. It was the confidence of someone who believed they'd already won. He asked about my day, kissed my cheek, even laughed at some joke on television. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but the words caught in my chest. I wasn't ready to confront him yet, not without leverage, not without proof that could corner him, strip him of the smooth excuses I knew he had ready. After he fell asleep, I crept out of bed and returned to the glow of my phone screen. I scrolled through his emails, a habit I'd never dared before, but now necessity outweighed guilt. His inbox was a labyrinth of confirmations, itineraries, and receipts. A name appeared repeatedly: Victoria. My stomach twisted as I clicked open message after message. Victoria wasn't just an acquaintance. She was listed as his travel companion. My fingers went cold, my breath shallow. Who was she? A business partner? A friend? Or something worse? Something that would break me even further. I wanted to slam the phone down, to pretend I hadn't seen it. But denial was no longer a luxury I could afford. Victoria's name carried a weight I couldn't shake, like a shadow creeping into every corner of my mind. There were spa packages booked for 2, dinner reservations for 2, and even a note in one booking: honeymoon suite with a view. My chest ached as if someone had taken a hammer to it. All those nights Benjamin told me he was working late. All those times he promised he was fighting for our future. They had been lies, feeding into this grand betrayal. The next day, I called Clara. My voice trembled as I told her everything. The charges, the bookings, the mysterious Victoria. There was silence on the other end before she spoke, her tone laced with both anger and pity. "Savannah, you can't let this slide. He's not just lying to you. He's robbing you." She urged me to contact the bank, to report the theft, to cut off his access immediately. But I hesitated. As much as I wanted justice, a part of me still clung to the hope that there was some mistake, some explanation that could soften the blow. Love, even bruised and battered, is hard to kill. And mine still lingered, fragile but alive. That evening, I decided to test him. As we sat at dinner, I casually mentioned that my bank had called, asking about unusual charges. His fork froze halfway to his mouth for the briefest second, so quick I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching. Then he smiled, shrugging. Probably fraud. Banks are paranoid these days. His voice was steady, his face calm. But I saw it. The flicker in his eyes, the tiny hesitation, the shift in his breathing. It was there, and it confirmed everything I needed to know. He was lying, without shame, right to my face. The betrayal grew heavier with each passing hour, but so did my resolve. I began gathering every scrap of evidence: screenshots, receipts, emails. I created a folder, tucked away in my cloud storage, naming it Truth. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I knew I needed it. Proof was power. And if Benjamin thought he could silence me with charm and half-truths, he was gravely mistaken. For once, I would not be the naive wife who looked away. I would not protect his lies. Still, when I crawled into bed that night beside him, my heart twisted painfully. His breathing was slow and even, his face peaceful in sleep, as though he carried no burden at all. I reached out instinctively, almost brushing my fingers against his arm, but pulled back before touching him. That was the cruelest part of all. Loving someone who had already betrayed you, sharing the same space, yet feeling like a stranger in your own home. As the darkness pressed in, I whispered a vow to myself. I would uncover every secret Benjamin was hiding, no matter how deep it ran. And when the truth came to light, he would finally see the woman he had underestimated. The following week was a blur of nerves and paranoia. Every smile Benjamin gave me felt like a mask. Every word he spoke dripped with false sincerity. I watched him closely, cataloging his habits with the precision of a detective. He would leave early, claiming long meetings, but return late with excuses that were as flimsy as paper. I no longer asked questions. Instead, I listened, memorizing the holes in his stories. The more he spoke, the more I realized I was married to a stranger. The man I had loved and trusted was an illusion, and the real Benjamin was slipping through my fingers like smoke. I tried to function at work, but I was restless, unable to focus. Clara called often, urging me to make a decision, to stop waiting for the bomb to drop. But how do you destroy the life you've built overnight? How do you cut ties with someone who still holds the power to make your heart ache with a single glance? My mind was at war, logic screaming one thing, emotions whispering another. Yet beneath all the noise, a quiet fire burned. I needed answers. Not assumptions, not suspicions, but undeniable truth. One evening, I followed him. I parked 2 blocks away from his office and waited, my hands trembling against the steering wheel. When he finally appeared, he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, tall, elegant, with long dark hair that shimmered beneath the streetlights. She laughed at something he said, her hand brushing his arm, as though she'd done it 100 times before. My chest constricted as I watched them climb into his car. It was her, Victoria. Seeing her in flesh and blood made everything unbearably real. I pressed myself against the seat, hot tears stinging my eyes as I whispered, "How could you?" I followed them discreetly, my car crawling behind theirs as adrenaline surged through me. They drove to an upscale restaurant, one Benjamin had once promised to take me to but never did, saying it was too expensive right now. My knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as I watched them step inside, his hand resting protectively on her back. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out everything else. I could have stormed inside, made a scene, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there in the shadows, watching my life unravel in real time, my faith in him shattering with every minute that passed. Hours later, when they finally left, I followed them again, every nerve in my body raw and alert. They didn't head back toward her place or even a hotel. They drove back toward our neighborhood. Panic flooded me as the thought struck. Was he bold enough to bring her into our home? My heart pounded so hard it hurt, but to my relief, or horror, they stopped a block away, where she got out and walked into a nearby apartment building. He waited until she disappeared inside before driving the short distance home, like a predator returning to its den after a hunt. When I slipped back into the house, I sat in the dark, waiting for him. The front door creaked open, and he stepped in, humming under his breath. He didn't notice me at first. When he finally did, he froze. For a moment, our eyes locked, and in that silence, I saw everything. His guilt, his calculation, and his fear. "Savannah," he said carefully, "what are you doing up so late?" His tone was casual, but the tension in his posture betrayed him. I wanted to scream, to accuse, but I stayed silent, studying him as though he were a puzzle I was close to solving. Instead of confrontation, I offered him one last chance. "I just couldn't sleep," I said softly, my voice betraying none of the chaos inside me. His shoulders relaxed, but only slightly. He kissed my forehead as though nothing had happened and walked upstairs. I sat on the couch long after, the taste of his betrayal thick on my tongue. That night, I realized something important. The game wasn't just about lies anymore. It was about survival. I had to protect myself, not only emotionally, but financially. He wasn't just breaking my heart. He was building a future without me, funded by everything I had worked for. The next day, I visited the bank in person. I explained the suspicious charges, careful to phrase everything as though I were uncertain, not yet accusing. The manager listened attentively, nodding with concern. "We've already flagged some of these transactions, Mrs. Hayes," he said gravely. "They appear unusual. If you like, we can freeze the account temporarily." The words hit me like a lifeline. I agreed immediately. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of power return. Benjamin thought he was 2 steps ahead, but I was finally catching up. As I walked out of the bank, a chill breeze brushed against my skin. carrying a strange sense of clarity. The road ahead was painful, uncertain, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Benjamin's carefully crafted web was beginning to unravel, and I was no longer the blind, trusting wife. I was the one with the power to pull the threads until the whole thing collapsed. And when it did, Benjamin wouldn't know what hit him. That night, after freezing the account, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my body rigid with exhaustion but my mind refusing to rest. Every detail of Benjamin's betrayal replayed in my head like a cruel film. The way Victoria's hand had lingered on his arm, the intimate look they'd shared across the restaurant table, the care in his touch as he guided her into the building. It wasn't a fling. It wasn't just lust. It was something deeper, something more dangerous. Commitment. And that realization terrified me more than anything else. He wasn't preparing a secret life. He was already living it. The next morning, Benjamin acted as though everything was normal. He kissed me on the cheek, poured himself coffee, and made small talk about his schedule. But I saw through him now. Every word felt rehearsed, every smile like a costume. I tried to match his performance, pretending to be the naive wife who had no clue, but my insides burned with rage and heartbreak. As he left, I forced a smile and waved, but as soon as the door clicked shut, I collapsed at the table, tears flooding my eyes. My world was collapsing, and I had to decide whether to bury the ruins or fight to rebuild them on my own terms. Unable to sit still, I drove past Victoria's apartment later that day. My pulse quickened as I parked across the street, feeling like an intruder in my own life. The curtains were drawn, but the faint glow of a lamp flickered through the fabric. I imagined them together inside, sharing moments that once belonged to me, our jokes, our dinners, our intimacy. My stomach churned, my chest tightened, and I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. For the first time, I felt the dangerous mix of hatred and grief. She wasn't just the other woman. She was the thief of my life. When I finally returned home, Clara called. I poured everything out. The bank, the frozen account, the stakeout, the sight of Victoria. Her silence on the other end spoke louder than words. "Savannah," she finally whispered, "you need to be careful. Men like him don't give up easily. If you've cut off his money, he's going to notice. And if he notices, he'll react. You need a plan." Her words lodged deep in my chest. She was right. This wasn't just about confronting him. This was about protecting myself from whatever storm was about to hit. Benjamin wasn't the kind to lose gracefully. That evening, Benjamin came home unusually early. My heart jumped as he entered, his eyes sharper, more calculating than usual. "Did you go to the bank today?" he asked casually, almost too casually. My throat tightened, but I forced a calm smile. "Yes," I lied. "I just had to check on some routine things." His eyes lingered on me, searching for cracks in my expression. For a moment I thought he'd seen through me, but then he smiled, kissed my forehead, and walked away. My body sagged with relief, but deep down I knew. He suspected something. The mask was slipping on both sides. The days that followed were filled with tension so thick it was suffocating. Benjamin grew restless, his phone glued to his hand, his temper shorter. I began to notice patterns. The way he always stepped outside to take certain calls, the way he locked his laptop the second I entered the room. He was building walls between us, but in doing so, he revealed just how much he had to hide. At night, I'd lie beside him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wondering how he could sleep so peacefully while dragging me through hell. One night, unable to take it anymore, I crept into his study while he slept. My hands shook as I opened drawers, sifted through papers, and checked his desk. Most of it was innocuous: bills, receipts, work documents. But then I found a small folder tucked away at the back of a drawer. Inside were copies of emails and travel itineraries, all under Victoria's name. He'd booked hotels, dinners, even a second trip abroad, using my money. But what chilled me wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the note attached to one itinerary. This time, forever. I clutched the papers in my trembling hands, bile rising in my throat. He wasn't just having an affair. He was planning a life with her. He was going to leave me with nothing but debts and broken memories. Rage coursed through me like fire, but beneath it was fear. Fear of what he'd do when he realized his plan was crumbling. That night, as I tucked the papers back into place, one truth anchored itself inside me. I couldn't just wait for Benjamin's betrayal to destroy me. I had to strike first. The war had begun, and I was no longer the victim. The next morning, Benjamin's demeanor shifted. He was distant, pacing the kitchen like a predator confined to a cage, his jaw clenched and his eyes dark. When I asked if everything was all right, he brushed me off with a half-hearted excuse about work stress, but I could tell. He was unraveling. The frozen account had reached him, and though he hadn't confronted me directly, his silence spoke volumes. I tried to eat breakfast, but the food turned to ash in my mouth. My appetite was gone, stolen by the suffocating tension that seemed to follow me like a shadow. Clara called again that afternoon, and I finally confided the full extent of what I'd discovered. The folder, the itineraries, the note. Her sharp intake of breath told me everything I needed to know about how dire this situation was. "Savannah," she said firmly, "you need evidence. Real evidence. Something you can take to the police, to a lawyer, to protect yourself if this explodes. Don't just wait for him to destroy you. Gather proof before it's too late." Her words sank into me like stone. She was right. My anger could fuel me, but without proof, I was powerless against Benjamin's manipulation. That night, I made my move. While Benjamin showered, I slipped back into the study, careful to silence every creak of the wooden floorboards. My heart hammered as I photographed the documents with my phone, capturing every detail. Dates, names, credit card numbers. The screen glowed faintly in the dim room, illuminating my shaking hands. It felt dangerous, almost treasonous to betray him like this, but then I reminded myself, he had already betrayed me 1,000 times over. Each photo was a shield, each captured page a step toward freedom. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control, but Benjamin wasn't blind. The very next day, he began circling me like a hawk. His questions grew sharper, his eyes watching me with a piercing suspicion that sent chills down my spine. "You've been on your phone a lot lately," he remarked casually, but I heard the venom behind the words. "Who are you talking to?" I forced a laugh and brushed it off, but inside, panic clawed at me. He was testing me, probing for weaknesses, and one slip would shatter the fragile facade I had built. It was a game of masks now, and the smallest crack could cost me everything. Late that evening, I overheard him on the phone. His voice was low, urgent, filled with frustration. "No, I can't access it yet. Just give me more time." "Yes, she suspects something." My blood froze in my veins. She suspects something. Was he talking about me? Or was Victoria the one pressing him for answers, demanding to know why the money wasn't flowing freely anymore? Either way, his desperation was growing, and desperate men were dangerous. I retreated silently back to the bedroom, my mind racing with the realization that I was now walking a razor's edge. I decided to take my evidence to the next level. The following morning, I scheduled a discreet consultation with a lawyer. Sitting in the sterile office, my palms slick with sweat, I poured out everything. The stolen funds, the infidelity, the documents. The lawyer listened intently, scribbling notes, his brow furrowed. When I finished, he looked at me gravely. "Savannah, you're in a precarious position. If he's already attempting to siphon money and planning to disappear, you need to protect your assets immediately. And if you have proof of fraud, we can take this to the authorities." The word fraud echoed in my mind like a death knell. Walking out of that office, I felt a strange mix of dread and liberation. Dread, because I knew confronting Benjamin would ignite a firestorm I might not survive. Liberation, because I was no longer helpless. I had allies, options, a way forward. The city street bustled around me, strangers moving past with carefree smiles, oblivious to the storm brewing in my life. For the first time, I envied them. I longed to be ordinary again, to have problems that didn't involve betrayal, lies, and the collapse of everything I once held sacred. But I also knew there was no going back. That night, as Benjamin slept soundly beside me, I lay awake with my phone in my hand, staring at the photos of his betrayal. Each image was a reminder of what he had tried to take from me, of how close I had come to losing not just my money, but my dignity, my future, my very sense of self. The rage that had once consumed me, now solidified into something colder, sharper, resolve. If Benjamin wanted war, then war he would have, and I would not fall quietly. I would fight, not just for survival, but for justice. The battle line had been drawn. The morning light filtered through the curtains, but its warmth could not touch the cold silence in the room. Benjamin sat at the edge of the bed, his back turned to me, shoulders tense as if carrying a burden too heavy to name. I greeted him softly. trying to break the icy barrier between us, but his reply was clipped, his voice raw. Something in him had shifted, and I could feel it like static in the air. He wasn't just angry, he was losing control. When he finally rose to his feet, his eyes met mine with a hardness I had never seen before. "Savannah," he said, "do you trust me?" The question was a dagger, and for the first time I couldn't lie. That day was suffocating. Benjamin followed me around the house, his presence heavy, his glances sharp and calculated. Every move I made seemed to be under scrutiny. The way I checked my phone, the way I paused by the study door, even the time I spent cooking dinner. It felt less like marriage and more like captivity. I tried to maintain normalcy, asking him about his work, suggesting we go out for dinner, but he rejected every attempt at peace. He wasn't looking for comfort, he was hunting for confirmation, some slip of the tongue or action that would expose me. I felt like prey in my own home. That evening, he snapped. I had left my phone charging in the living room when he barged in, holding it in his hand like evidence. "Who have you been talking to?" His voice thundered, the veins in his neck bulging. I lunged to grab it back, but he was faster, scrolling through my messages. Thankfully, Clara and I had been cautious. Our calls were short, our texts vague. Still, the suspicion in his eyes deepened as he stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. "You're hiding something, Savannah. Don't think I don't know." His words dripped with venom, and for a moment I saw the stranger he was becoming. Later that night, while he showered, I locked myself in the guest room and dialed Clara. My voice shook as I whispered, "He's on to me. He knows I'm hiding something." Clara's tone was urgent but steady. "Then you need to accelerate. Don't wait for him to make the first move. File a formal report. Transfer what you can into a safe account, and make sure you're not alone with him if things escalate." I nodded even though she couldn't see me, my chest heaving with the weight of fear. Filing a report meant crossing a line I could never uncross. But hadn't Benjamin already done the same with me? The next morning, I went to the police station, clutching the folder of printed evidence I had compiled overnight. My hands trembled as I handed it over to the officer, explaining everything from the stolen funds to the suspicious calls I had overheard. The officer listened with patience, but when I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exchanged a look with a colleague. "Mrs. Carter," he said slowly, "there may be more to this than you realize. You're not the only one who has come forward with concerns about your husband." His words hit me like a tidal wave. What more could there be? Who else was Benjamin deceiving? Driving home, my mind spun in chaos. The officer's words replayed over and over. "You're not the only one." Had Benjamin woven a web so vast that I was just one of many trapped in it? The thought sickened me. When I walked through the door, Benjamin was waiting in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his expression unreadable. "Where were you?" he asked flatly. My pulse skyrocketed. I muttered something about errands, but his stare pierced through me, unblinking. I could feel the gulf widening between us, and with it, the certainty that the collision was imminent. That night, sleep abandoned me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of Benjamin's breathing beside me. Each inhale felt like the ticking of a bomb, counting down to detonation. I thought about the years we had spent together, the dreams we once shared, and how it had all corroded into this battlefield of suspicion and betrayal. Love had been replaced with strategy, tenderness with calculation. I realized that I wasn't mourning the man beside me anymore. I was preparing for war against him. My heart broke, but at the same time it hardened into something unshakable. By dawn, a strange calm settled over me. I knew now what had to be done. There was no salvaging the ruins of what we once had. There was only truth left to expose, consequences left to face. As Benjamin stirred beside me, unaware of the silent vow I had made in the darkness, I turned my gaze to the window and whispered to myself, "This ends soon." Little did I know, the storm waiting just beyond the horizon would be far greater than anything I could have imagined. The next day I could hardly breathe, the officer's words ringing in my head. "You're not the only one who has come forward with concerns about your husband." That single sentence dug under my skin, clawing at my sanity. Who were these other people? Neighbors? Business partners? Or perhaps women? Women I never knew existed, each carrying their own story of betrayal. My mind was a hurricane of theories, and every one of them painted Benjamin in darker shades. Yet I needed more than speculation. I needed answers, tangible proof that the man I once loved was far more dangerous than I dared to believe. I spent the morning combing through Benjamin's office while he went out for work. My hands shook as I opened drawers, shuffled through files, and scrolled on the laptop he'd left behind. At first, there was nothing. Just tax forms, travel itineraries, receipts. But then, buried in a folder labeled innocently as clients, I found a string of emails. They weren't about clients at all. They were about offshore accounts, coded transfers, and names I didn't recognize. The amounts listed were staggering, far beyond what he could possibly explain away. And attached to one email was a chilling phrase, "Keep her in the dark." My stomach twisted as I realized I was the her. When Benjamin returned that afternoon, I tried to act natural, but my pulse gave me away. He noticed. His eyes narrowed as he placed his jacket on the chair. "You've been busy today," he muttered. My breath hitched, but I forced a laugh, talking about laundry and cooking. Yet the weight of his gaze lingered, studying me as if peeling back layers of my soul. I excused myself to the kitchen, but I could feel his suspicion following like a shadow. Every second stretched taut, ready to snap. It was only a matter of time before one of us shattered. That evening, Clara called me back with urgency in her voice. "Savannah," I dug deeper. "Benjamin isn't just in trouble with you. There are at least 3 separate investigations tied to him. Fraud, laundering, even a possible connection to shell companies linked overseas." I gasped, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. How is that possible? How did I never know? Clara's voice softened. "Because he made sure you didn't. He's built his entire life on control and concealment. And now that control is slipping. That makes him dangerous." My chest felt like it was collapsing under invisible weight. The truth was suffocating, but it also ignited something inside me. Resolve. If Benjamin was tangled in this web, then I couldn't keep pretending I was just an innocent bystander. I had a choice: stay silent and let the storm devour me, or act decisively before it was too late. I began copying files, photographing documents with my phone, creating my own trail of evidence. Each click of the camera felt like rebellion, a step toward freedom, though it also carried the heavy dread of discovery. If he caught me, there would be no turning back. Later that night, Benjamin poured himself another drink, his movements sharp, restless. He sat across from me at the table, the glass clinking against the wood as he leaned forward. "Savannah," he said, voice low, almost trembling with restrained fury. "I know you're hiding something, and I will find out what it is." His words crawled under my skin, ice in my veins. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but fear glued my lips shut. Instead, I excused myself, walked calmly to the bathroom, and locked the door, holding my trembling body against the wall. My tears were silent, but my determination screamed. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. I froze. Benjamin was still asleep, so I rushed to answer quietly. Standing there was an officer, the same one who had taken my report. He handed me a sealed envelope and whispered, "Read this when you're alone. We'll be in touch." My fingers quivered as I slid the envelope under my sweater before Benjamin stirred. Hours later, when I finally locked myself in the guest room and opened it, my breath left my body. Inside was a detailed report linking Benjamin to a long list of fraudulent investments and a note. "He's being watched. For your safety, keep your distance." The final sentence of the note echoed through me like thunder. "For your safety, keep your distance." Suddenly, everything crystallized. The police weren't just investigating him. They were warning me, preparing me for the inevitable implosion of his carefully constructed life. As I folded the note back into the envelope, a cold realization struck me. I wasn't just a wife betrayed. I was a witness, a potential liability, maybe even a target. And if Benjamin ever suspected how much I knew, the danger wouldn't come from strangers. It would come from the man lying beside me at night. The air in the house felt heavier by the day, like the walls themselves knew secrets they were desperate to spill. Benjamin moved differently now, slower, deliberate, always watching. His laughter, once warm and effortless, had turned into something hollow, calculated. He asked questions in passing, pretending they were casual, but each one felt like a probe into my thoughts. "Did you call your sister today? Have you gone through the mail? Why is your phone always with you?" I answered carefully, weaving lies with shaky threads, praying none would snap. But paranoia had already begun to bloom in his eyes. I tried to keep myself busy to mask the constant dread. Cooking, cleaning, organizing. Mundane chores became a kind of shield. Yet every sound in the house startled me. The creak of the floorboards, the slam of a cabinet, even the hum of Benjamin's phone vibrating on the counter. My nerves frayed like an old rope. At night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing, wondering if he truly slept or if he lay there too, silently plotting, waiting for me to make a mistake. Trust was gone. Only suspicion remained. Then, one evening, as I reached for my purse, Benjamin's hand shot out, snatching it away before I could react. "Why are you always clutching this like your life depends on it?" he sneered, rifling through the contents with sharp movements. My chest burned with panic. My phone still had the photos of his emails and documents. "It's just my purse, Benjamin. You're overreacting." I tried to sound calm, but my voice trembled. He pulled out the phone and stared at me. For a moment, I thought he would open it right there, but instead he placed it back, his lips curling into a smile that chilled me more than rage ever could. "You're hiding something," he whispered, leaning so close I could feel the heat of his breath. "And one day, Savannah, I'll find out what it is." Then he walked away as if nothing had happened, leaving me trembling in the silence. His restraint was scarier than violence, because it meant he was planning, waiting for the perfect time to strike. I clutched my purse tighter after that, but the fear was no longer about what I carried inside. It was about the fact that Benjamin knew there was something to find. The war between us was no longer silent. It was only a matter of time before it erupted. Clara's calls became my lifeline. She whispered updates late at night when Benjamin was asleep, feeding me bits of information that made my blood run cold. "Savannah, his accounts are under federal review. The names on the transfers, they match people involved in international fraud networks. This isn't just about stolen money anymore. He's connected to something much larger." I pressed the phone so hard against my ear it hurt, desperate to soak in every detail, but the weight of her words crushed me. Benjamin wasn't just a liar. He was entangled in something criminal, something that could drag me down with him if I wasn't careful. The police envelope still sat hidden inside my dresser, its contents burned into my mind. "For your safety, keep your distance." But how could I keep my distance when I shared a bed with him? I rehearsed escape plans in my head, packing a bag, leaving in the middle of the night, calling the officer to shelter me. Yet fear paralyzed me. What if he found out? What if he caught me halfway to the door? My imagination tormented me with images of confrontation, of his hands tightening around my wrists, his voice snarling accusations as the walls closed in. And then came the night I couldn't bear it any longer. Benjamin had gone out late, claiming he had a meeting. I sat at the table with my phone and stared at the officer's number. My finger hovered over the screen, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might shake the walls. Finally, I pressed call. When the officer answered, I whispered, "It's Savannah. I can't stay here anymore. He knows I've seen something. Please, you have to help me before it's too late." The silence on the line felt eternal, before the officer replied firmly, "Stay calm. We've been monitoring him. Tomorrow morning we'll move. Just keep yourself safe tonight." I hung up, my entire body trembling, tears streaming down my face. Tomorrow morning, just one more night, and it would all be over. One more night of pretending, of surviving in the house of glass where every move could shatter me. But as I wiped my tears and prepared to face Benjamin's return, I couldn't shake the terror that tomorrow might come too late, because in that fragile silence of waiting, anything, absolutely anything, could happen. That night felt endless. Every tick of the clock echoed like a warning, pounding into my skull as I sat curled on the couch with a blanket that no longer gave comfort. Benjamin returned around midnight, smelling of whiskey and expensive cologne, his steps uneven but his gaze sharp as a blade. He dropped his jacket on the chair, his eyes scanning me as though he could see the guilt etched across my skin. "Up late, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Too softly. My throat tightened. Every part of me screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. He walked over and sat across from me, the dim lamp casting shadows that hollowed his face. "You've been distant," he said, tilting his head like he was studying prey. "Not just distant, guarded. It makes me wonder, what are you hiding, Savannah?" His words struck like knives. I forced a smile, my lips trembling. "Nothing, Ben. I'm just tired." His grin widened, mocking. Liar. My heart hammered so violently that I feared he could hear it. He leaned forward, inches from my face, and whispered, "I'll find out, you know. I always do." The tension thickened until I could barely breathe. But then, outside, the sound of tires crunching against gravel broke the silence. Benjamin's head snapped toward the window, his expression hardening instantly. He stood, pulling the curtain back. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, growing closer. My body froze in shock. It wasn't tomorrow morning. It was now. The officer had lied, or maybe plans had changed. My pulse surged with adrenaline, part terror, part relief. This was it. Benjamin turned to me, his face twisted with fury. "What did you do?" His voice thundered through the room, shaking me to my core. "You called them, didn't you?" I stammered, words spilling out. I couldn't. Benjamin, I know everything." His eyes blazed, and in one swift motion he grabbed my arm, yanking me off the couch. Pain shot through me as his grip tightened. "You think you're smarter than me? You think you can ruin me?" Spit flew from his lips, his voice nearly unrecognizable, primal with rage. The pounding at the door came like an explosion. "Police! Open up!" Benjamin shoved me toward the hallway, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. He ripped open the drawer where he kept old files, scattering papers everywhere in a frantic attempt to find something. I didn't know what. The door splintered, shouts filling the house. Within seconds, armed officers stormed in, their voices booming commands. "Hands up! Don't move!" Benjamin's chest heaved as he looked from me to them, his face contorted with hatred and despair. Then, in a moment that felt both slow and violent, he released me and raised his hands, but not before spitting out words that sent a chill through me. "She's the one you should question. She knew. She's been part of this." My blood turned to ice. The officers ignored him at first, forcing him to the ground, pinning his arms behind his back. But those words lingered in the air, poisonous, sinking into my skin. I stood there trembling, watching the man I once loved, dragged across the floor like a fallen king, screaming lies to the very end. As they hauled him outside, one officer stayed behind, his eyes meeting mine with a calm intensity. "Savannah, you're safe now," he said firmly. But I wasn't sure. Safe? My house was in ruins, my marriage destroyed, my life ripped apart by secrets I hadn't asked to uncover. I sank onto the couch, my body shaking uncontrollably, tears blurring everything. I wanted to scream, to collapse, to disappear. All I could do was clutch the blanket around me, as though it could still shield me from the storm that had consumed my world. Outside, Benjamin's voice still carried, muffled but full of venom, vowing revenge, swearing he'd never let me go free. The sound of the police car door slamming shut silenced him at last. But in that silence, I heard something far louder, the realization that nothing would ever be the same. My husband was gone, my trust shattered, and the truth of his crimes now lay bare for everyone to see. Yet as I sat in the flickering shadows of my living room, I couldn't help but wonder, what if his last words weren't just a desperate lie? What if there was some truth buried in them that I hadn't yet uncovered? The house was quiet, eerily so, as if it were holding its breath after the chaos that had erupted days ago. I walked slowly through each room, my footsteps tentative, touching surfaces that had once been familiar and comforting. The couch where Benjamin had lounged with that fake warmth, the kitchen counter where he had counted stolen money and plotted his lies, the bedroom that had been both sanctuary and prison. They all seemed like relics from a life that no longer belonged to me. Every object carried the echo of deceit, yet the silence surrounding me was a strange kind of balm. It whispered, in its own cold way, that the war had ended. I was alive, I was free, and finally I could breathe. Outside, the city continued unaware of the storm that had just passed inside these walls. Sirens had faded, neighbors had returned to their routines, and the news crews had moved on to the next scandal. Benjamin had been taken into custody, the weight of his crimes stretching far beyond what I had ever imagined. Fraud, theft, connections to offshore accounts. It was a web so intricate that I had only glimpsed its outer strands. As I sat in the living room, clutching the blanket I had slept under the night of the arrest, I realized that he was gone in a way that was irreversible. The man I had loved, the man I had feared, had been stripped down to nothing, exposed for the world to see. Despite the relief, an emptiness lingered. I had spent years intertwining my life with his, believing in the love we had built, the future we had promised one another. And yet, in one swift, terrifying sequence of revelations, all of that trust had crumbled. The realization hit me like ice water. I wasn't just recovering stolen money or safety. I was rebuilding myself from scratch. Every memory of him, sweet moments that had once felt eternal, now bore the sting of betrayal. The man I thought I knew was a stranger, and the woman I had become in response was someone I barely recognized. But slowly, amid the wreckage, I felt a spark of something new, resilience. I began the painstaking process of reclaiming what was mine, both physically and emotionally. The documents, the bank accounts, and the evidence I had meticulously gathered became tools of empowerment rather than fear. I contacted lawyers to ensure that Benjamin could no longer access a single penny, and I reinforced my personal security, installing new locks, passwords, and safeguards. But even more importantly, I started to rebuild my sense of self. For so long, his manipulation had dictated my decisions, my feelings, my sense of worth. Now, for the first time, I realized that freedom wasn't just about safety, it was about reclaiming my identity. Sleep came unevenly those first nights. I would wake in a cold sweat, startled by imagined footsteps or shadows cast by ordinary objects. Every sound made my heart race, every creak of the floor a reminder that Benjamin's presence had been more than physical. It had been psychological, invasive, suffocating. But with each passing night, the fear receded slightly, replaced by a cautious sense of control. I began to take small steps, walking through my neighborhood, calling friends I had neglected, even enjoying the sunlight that streamed through the windows without flinching. Slowly, life began to feel like my own again. The aftermath of Benjamin's arrest also brought unexpected clarity. I realized how much I had relied on others to define my happiness and security. Friends and family offered comfort, but I had to find strength within myself. I began to journal every day, pouring my emotions onto paper in long, unbroken streams of thought. I wrote about anger, grief, betrayal, and ultimately forgiveness, not for him, but for myself. Forgiving didn't mean forgetting. Forgiving meant freeing my heart from the constant tension of fear and resentment. And with each word, I felt a little lighter, a little stronger, a little more prepared to face whatever came next. One morning, as sunlight spilled across the living room floor, I took a long, contemplative walk through the neighborhood. Children played on the sidewalks, neighbors waved from their porches, and the ordinary rhythms of life unfolded around me. For a moment, I envied their innocence, their ignorance of the darkness I had endured. Yet at the same time, I felt a quiet pride. I had survived a betrayal so deep, it could have destroyed me entirely. I had emerged from the wreckage, bruised but unbroken. The future stretched before me, uncertain, yes, but entirely mine to shape. And for the first time in years, I truly felt hope. By evening, I returned to the house, exhausted, but at peace. I lit a few candles, letting their soft light warm the corners of the rooms that had once felt cold and hostile. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the now empty chair where Benjamin had once schemed and plotted. And in that stillness, I made a vow to myself. Never again would I allow anyone to control my life, to manipulate my emotions, or to steal my peace. I would live boldly, fiercely, and honestly. I would cherish trust, demand respect, and honor the resilience I had fought so hard to reclaim. And now, as I share this story with you, I want you to carry a piece of this strength with you. If you followed me through every twist, every moment of suspense and heartbreak, then you understand the power of courage and truth. Life will always challenge us, sometimes with people we love, sometimes with circumstances beyond our control, but we can survive, we can rise, and we can reclaim our lives. So, if you want to continue witnessing stories of resilience, courage, and survival, make sure you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Join me, and let's continue this journey together, stronger, wiser, and unafraid of the storms ahead.